Amon's eyes regained their focus after exactly 7 seconds. They shook when Amon took in the changes in his surroundings and in himself. How? What did you do to me? He did not know or understand. The annihilation condition was complete. Of course, even if the condition was complete, it would be difficult for Muyang to eradicate him. Lower-level demon gods became greatly weakened when their annihilation condition was complete, but a demon god of Amon's class was not affected in any way. However, Muyang was satisfied. Amon was confused because he did not know the command Muyang had placed deep into him. Did you go back in time? Why is that angel in your soul? Angel? Was he talking about Gabriel? Amon was correct about going back in time. He seemed to have found it by directly coming into contact with Muyang's soul. Muyang also was not sure how he had gone back in time, but Amon looked as if he had an insight into Muyang's time travel. That's impossible. How can something like this happen? Nothing is impossible. Impossible is only in your mind. Amon glared at Muyang. He was angry but was also controlling his anger at the same time. The master of magic and the seeker of truth. He had been lifted from the shackles put on by Baal and Solomon. While he seemed unaware yet, the effects would begin to show. Muyang spoke slowly. Amon, are you still afraid of Solomon? It was a primal fear for demon gods. The events that occurred before they became demon gods were trauma tormenting them for eons. Even though they became divine beings and took steps to be complete, that fear never went away. So they assembled around Baal, who functioned as a core. He was a being that would dilute their fears for them. Amon half opened his eyes. Do you think I fear someone like Solomon? That's good. Muyang turned his head. Amon was confused right now. His mind was disordered to the extent he forgot to attack Muyang. Muyang was the first unknown Amon had come into contact with. He was chaos itself in a completely different way from Solomon and Baal. So Muyang initiated the negotiations. Which would you choose from, the unknown, which is me, or the fear, that is Solomon? The world burned when Muyang finished his question. The sun turned redder and an unbelievable heat scorched everything. Gremory hurriedly placed a protective barrier, but it was not enough. The weak demons burned with shrieks. Countless bodies dropped on the ground after becoming ashes. Not only that, the shields the king of the dead created to protect the rest of the demon gods were breaking apart. Diablo. Muyang turned his head and Amon also focused on that phenomenon. Diablo, the true owner of the flames who burned Horus, the demon god of flames, to death. He stood on 2 feet, but with tens of horns, Diablo looked closer to a dragon with a majestic aura. He had only appeared and looked at the world with his 2 eyes but was burning and erasing everything. Muyang shuddered. It was the second time he encountered Diablo. However, the first time Diablo retreated due to Baal, as he had to escape from Baal's merciless attacks. This time it was different and incomparable with that time. Muyang had thought with Amon's help he would be able to handle Diablo, but now Muyang discarded that notion. Diablo has exceeded the world's limits. He had gone beyond the amount of power this world could hold. Solomon. Amon's gaze shook from fear, but also from his wrath resisting against it. Only act for yourself. The seeker of truth must not be restrained by anything. Amon clenched his teeth, but other demon gods were already retreating. Cowards. Amon sneered. The other demon gods were still mortally afraid of Solomon. If Baal did not act, they would only be cowards who continued to escape. Amon was no longer interested in Muyang and how he controlled Enroth. It was the same for Baal's command to remove Gremory. Amon was only focused on what he faced. Amon wanted to win against what had been holding him back for so long, and now he had the chance right in front of him. With a loud shout, Diablo's attack was too fast for Amon to think any longer. A massive stream of fire burst out of Diablo's mouth, and the flames swallowed the entire sky. It burned everything in its path and was rushing to Muyang and Amon. Conflagration. Amon built a massive wall of ice to separate the space between them to quench Diablo's flames. However, it was not enough as Diablo's fire burned everything, including all phenomena. Amon clicked his tongue and removed his gloves. He revealed striking black hands and Amon's magic began to fly out recklessly. Amon's horns grew and his eyeballs turned black. Also, the muscles in his human form exploded and expanded. However, it was unstable and Muyang turned his gaze immediately to Gremory. Gremory nodded as she read what Muyang wanted. She quickly removed the protective shields that were restricting magic. Amon began to show his might after the bothersome shields disappeared. Infinity Storm. Amon did not need to voice his spells to use magic, but epic-class spells needed to be voiced to enforce them. Amon's magic that overflowed soon resulted in massive chaos. An enormous round space formed in front of Amon, and it swallowed everything like a black hole. Diablo's flames whirled into the space Amon had created. Did it work? Yo! Muyang shook his head in his mind as the black hole started quaking. If Amon could handle infinity for real, he would exceed Baal. Infinity was a miracle number that transcended magic and was not Amon's expertise. Amon clenched his teeth sharply. Was he not avoiding what could be avoided because of pride? Amon's eyes changed again as small white stars shone in the infinite black of Amon's eyes, and analyzed Diablo's flames. I am the one who analyses all and reaches the truth. I will uncover even the flames of God. The speech of a magician is power, so a true magician saves his words. Reality itself could be imbued with speech and changed by the magician's will. Now Amon commanded and pierced through Diablo's flames simply with the pure power of his voice. Soon, Diablo's flames burst out after being reflected in the massive mirror Amon created. Diablo now faced his own flames. Amazing! Muyang was impressed. The only thing Muyang did was to remove a lock, but Amon had already taken a step further. He had not expected Amon to counter Diablo's attack. But it's still not enough. Amon had just opened his eyes, but Diablo was already complete. Muyang collected his flame. Strictly speaking, his fire skills came from Diablo the Lord of Fire, so Muyang could control Diablo's flame a little because they were similar. He needed only to open a path to manipulate Diablo's flames. The moment Muyang's body burst into flames, Diablo's flame divided into two. The attack had been split into half, and Muyang provided the breathing room Amon could use to form his counterattack. Diablo let out a deep and loud roar in protest. He waved his wings to float and ravaged the air with sharp claws. Right after, intense wind pressure sliced the space. Diablo had cut space at a speed that Muyang could barely manage to follow. With a sickening noise, Amon's body split into half. A clone. It was a clone that Amon had prepared in that split second, and Amon was already heading for Diablo. Is my enemy's enemy an ally? Amon was hurling his wrath at Diablo and Solomon at present. They were a more imminent danger to Muyang than Amon was. The two could reach an agreement. His weapon cried out for blood. Muyang threw the lance of Gabriel not to Diablo, but Solomon. He was behind Diablo hiding. Muyang was going after him, so he threw the lance to break Solomon's concealment skill. When everyone focused on Amon, Muyang struck at Solomon. He erased his presence, and the lance of Gabriel hit Solomon's body with a cracking noise. However, it did not reach Solomon as it went right through. The lance had no effect on Solomon's body. It was not enough, so Muyang revealed himself. The moment the lance of Gabriel hit the ground, Muyang raised his weapon and used his unique sword skill. Stance 51. The Evil Slayer. If Solomon was in another plane, Muyang only had to cut the space. As Muyang struck with his skill, the cut made in space revealed a black opening. Did it succeed? It failed. Solomon's body became transparent for a moment and soon returned to its original state. As I cannot touch you, you cannot touch me. Solomon stared at Muyang up close, and so did Muyang. I do not know why you have my angels and prayers, but die quietly like Kingslayer. With a tearing noise, the sky flushed scarlet and numerous meteors fell to crush those below. However, Muyang's expression stiffened. Did Kingslayer die? Kingslayer had been a noble and dignified knight who taught Muyang how to move forward. Muyang did not care for others' death, but this time it was different. Actually, Muyang had been changing by tiny steps for some time now. Muyang was feeling emotions for someone's death. It might be sadness, but Muyang could not know. Solomon continued on. Are you sad? Hurt? Kingslayer had hopes for you, but you're out of luck. I found you. Kingslayer fought with Solomon and lost, but questions remained. Muyang could not touch Solomon, and the opposite was also true. However, the Kingslayer could face Solomon. Was it because he was a master of darkness? Or was it because he did not originate from this world? You cannot win against Diablo no matter what you try. Why are you trying to eradicate everything? Young could not help asking where Solomon's hate and anger stemmed from. Solomon smiled eerily at Young's question. You humans were the most spectacular failure out of the races I created. You were the most useless, most bloodthirsty, and most arrogant. You are a worthless race who eliminate other races, make them extinct, and slaughter each other. Human beings are failures. Solomon's words were strange. Was Solomon the creator deity? This world is a wastebasket where I kept the waste left over my destruction. Is it not natural to throw out the trash? Solomon was confident and seemed to be telling the truth. He smiled as Young remained silent. Are your questions answered? Think of it as a final gift for showing me the end of this game, thief. I will step away once Ars Nova and Ars Polina are returned to me. With a titanic noise, countless meteors stormed over Young's head as soon as Solomon finished his words. Solomon spread his hands. Did you think it was a good idea? To question me? I am your master and creator. Solomon began to rant. All words were vomited from his mouth. Like the insane ramblings from a psychopath. The great almighty Solomon, master of demons, the supreme hope and shining savior of humanity, was certifiably ready for his own rubber room. I will destroy this world and recreate it. For the birth of a better, superior race. Solomon was scum. He was a monster who spoke nonsense. His perception and morals were completely different from someone sane. However, Solomon wasn't finished. He only cared about destroying one race to create a more advanced race. How is this different from the so-called humans, who raised the banner of ethnic cleansing? How was he different from the monsters and human guys called Nazis? There was a wrongness in him. This was a contradiction. Young started to accelerate. He managed to escape the largest explosion yet, one that was 128 times stronger than others. Avoiding meteorites, crushing them, and spreading all 3 pairs of wings. I have lived every day like it was my last. He wasn't completely ready but was prepared for anything. Every path Young took always led in the end to the edge of the cliff. That's why Young challenged everything and won every time. Maybe one day everything will be different and he is truly cornered. Even Young had thought about it. However, this world is wrong. And Young was the only one who was able to fix it. If you don't overcome yourself, there is no point at keeping up with Young. Thus, you will always be second. Not possible to win against Diablo? When had you fought to win? Young laughed and laughed. Every time Young participated in a fight, everyone knew he was not going to win and he will lose. Victory had never been possible for Young. However, he didn't give up and was able to reach this stage. Solomon doesn't know Young. He really didn't. If someone says that Young can't do something, he will try even harder to do it. The wings of Gabriel. Young spread all his wings. He gathered his magical and divine powers in them. One by one meteorites started falling and destroying both sides. They defined the area called the domain of Diablo. It was important to destroy his domain and Diablo's absolute control over it. 7,777 feathers flew in the air. Thud, whang. Feathers were smashing meteorites. Meteorites continued to fall, but Young shot them down with his feathers. This was the fight of who is faster. But Young was better at hitting meteorites and they were crashing one by one. Wicked. Truck. Young swung anguish. He passed by one meteorite and it immediately became dust. Maximum destruction with minimum force. Meteorites were still breaking all around the area. Everything was happening in a blur. Young has destroyed dozens of meteorites within seconds. Wah. Diablo again started throwing a tantrum. Since things weren't going his way, everything made him rage. Not easy. However, maintaining his battle tempo was unbelievably hard for Young. He moved at a speed impossible for humans. His entire body was covered in sweat. You have learned to move faster. This skill can't be taught to humans. Looks like you had encountered Kingslayer and Ozpolina. Solomon mocked Young. Even though he was distant, his voice sounded like he was speaking in his ear. Young calmed down and said to Solomon. One more question, Solomon. Are you the real Solomon? He was asking one question at the time. However, there were lots of unanswered questions. This time Solomon reacted to the question with a hardened expression. What you are talking about? Young kept quiet. He had remembered about finding ALS Nova. ALS Nova. Miracle prayer. He was told that Solomon had left ALS Nova. All who visited that place was told the same. However, now Solomon is saying that Muyang is a thief. Something doesn't match up. So it was important to find out the truth. Something was missing. Or it's a lie. Solomon was said to be under the Lemegetine's influence. His memory might have been damaged. If not, there was a possibility that he wasn't real Solomon. Anyways, Solomon wasn't the same. He also said, I had the Angel of Time. Bas Polina. The real name of the Angel of Time. This Muyang Yu. The Angel of Time was kidnapped and raised by Baal. But Solomon insisted that Muyang has it. It has something to do with a reversing time. It was just intuition. However, if Muyang and Angel of Time are somehow related, it will confirm that they have returned from the past. Muyang wouldn't have returned without a reason. Still, it was strange that only Muyang has received this privilege. This had provided useful information. Also, looks like Solomon needs Muyang. If he can't get Muyang, everything will become in vain. Finally, intentions were revealed. However, Solomon lacks lots of things. Diablo was the real thing. Solomon wasn't able to share Diablo's power. If Diablo is defeated, Solomon is not a problem. That was the conclusion. Muyang became cold. Diablo. If he defeats that fire demon god, Solomon will be impotent. But Solomon must have something hidden, otherwise he wouldn't have appeared here. This place was Armageddon, a place where demon gods gather to fight Diablo. Without hope and with certain death. Their last stand. But Muyang was also there. Adversity is my favorite thing. Muyang smiled. Muyang made the impossible possible. That was his skill. However, this time the opponent was strong. Of course, moving forward wasn't easy, so he had to clear his path. Also, he had to create new plans. Thus, Muyang was doing well up till now. He knew several things. Solomon destroyed the earth and humanity. Some humans who survived became demon gods. Baal came and stole the Lemegitine and the angels from Solomon. Baal used the Lemegitine and remaining humans to make the 71 demon gods. And Solomon tried to keep Baal from using the demon gods. Baal tries to destroy all beings except demons. The emergence of Diablo caused trouble for Baal, and Solomon tried to exploit this. Solomon wants to destroy everything. This is what happened. However, some questions remain. The biggest question was why Baal wants to destroy everything except demons. Weirdly, Baal and Solomon technically wanted the same thing. Demons. They were the new race. They were created by Baal and the demon gods. Baal wants to make them owners of the earth. And it wasn't a good thing. Both Solomon and Baal were evil to Muyang's understanding. No matter which one wins, humanity is going to be destroyed. In the past, Baal acted quickly. The human race quickly became extinct, as well as all other life forms. If you think about the situation, Solomon might look to be an easier target. However, no matter who wins, humanity will be still destroyed. But maybe it was possible to change something. This change was called Muyang. Muyang now somehow had Aeolus Polina and Aeolus Nova that used to belong to Baal. Muyang went the third way, the path no one else walked. I will get rid of both of them. He was eager to destroy Solomon and Baal and return the peace to the earth. If he wasn't able to destroy them, Muyang was ready to burn this world and devils. No new races were needed. All races are supposed to be created by natural selection, not by someone else's might. Everything will be returned back to earth when peace is restored. Nothing is perfect. Everything is just an illusion. Destroy all imperfections for a perfect world? It's like destroying all possibilities. Even Muyang wasn't perfect. No one was perfect, not even Solomon. And his biggest mistake is his failure to admit it. A huge fire rose around Diablo. Amon was fiercely fighting Diablo. And the battle was just a matter of time. As soon as Amon's power finishes, he won't be able to handle Diablo. Muyang finished all preparations. The purpose became very clear. Muyang decided to act like in the beginning and just believe in himself. In his plan, only Solomon was a new addition. Food. Anguish was trembling from hunger. Gluttony. Anguish had the power of gluttony. However, he was a picky eater. He only ate weapons that were the same or superior as him. Anguish was crying because there was food just in front of his eyes. At that time, the spear of Gabriel had returned to Muyang's hands and was shining even brighter than before. Originally, Anguish wasn't interested in it. After Muyang had separated the powers of Lucifer and Gabriel so he could gain superior power, things changed. After that, he looked at Anguish and heard its desire. Anguish was waiting for Muyang's permission. Yes, this possibility also existed and was possible like other million possibilities. Can Solomon even understand? No one who seeks perfection can become a true god. The true god is understanding and seeking for evolution and potential. This was the reason why Muyang didn't trust gods including Baal and Solomon. They all were fake and borrowing names. Muyang permitted Anguish. Eat it. Wang. Wang. But. Anguish is triggered. Anguish has consumed Gabriel's spear. Anguish has finished. Name, Anguish. Rating X. Category Weapon. Effect, the anguish of the world. A sword that kills falsehood. Increases 20% of all abilities. Ability to steal blood from the opponent and recover the stamina of the user. Gluttony, consumes high-tier weapons to become stronger. Weapon attack, lightning, S+++. A powerful lightning attack. Divinity, S+++, the power to cut evil. Strength plus 100. Perception plus 100. Intelligence plus 100. Divine power plus 200. All abilities plus 100. Anguish has evolved. At first it was just a mere weapon, but over time it evolved greatly and was close to reaching the maximum. The sword's handle was decorated with Gabriel's feather for extra strength. Now the blade started to shine even brighter. It wasn't just a mere appearance change. Muyang was able to tell that immediately. That evolution of Anguish was the evolution of Muyang's true self. Anguish's story has been heard. Now Muyang knew what it means and wants. Anguish felt like a part of Muyang's body. The day of the sword. Finally, Anguish and Muyang became one. Gremory turned her head to see the sword she had lent him completed without her help. Everyone, including Gremory, the demons and Diablo, stopped moving as Anguish shattered the battlefield with blinding light. Muyang changed as he held the sword, and his enormous presence started to crush everyone. You really exceed my expectations. Gremory would have lost, but everything changed after Muyang appeared. She did not know what would happen, but things were moving forward finally. Muyang had awakened Gremory's numbed emotions. Was this because he was the master of Anguish? Gremory might be feeling anguished. What are you going to change? What can you change? Solomon wanted the death of everything so he can create anew in a barren, lifeless world. Baal wanted for only the demons to live. Gremory hated their radical choices because they would bring destruction to the world. However, Muyang was different because he wanted to encompass all. He was going that path despite knowing it was impossible. The new path. Gremory was first suspicious. She wanted to keep Muyang in check because he extinguished Largy and he tried to use her. However, after a while to her Muyang changed. Gremory still did not know what Muyang was thinking, but she saw that he was relentless in achieving his goal. Therefore she naturally kept her distance, and Amon was the same. Amon assisted Muyang by his own volition when Muyang faced Diablo. The two had been locked in a life-or-death struggle just before they met their common enemy. It was normally impossible for two who bore such hatred towards each other to become allies like this, but Muyang made it possible. There's no going back for us. Gremory clasped her hands together, and dozens of petals flew in the sky and came together to protect Muyang. Muyang, please win. With an ear-shattering shriek, Anguish cut Diablo's skin, and flame gushed from the wound in a torrent. Muyang stepped back and Amon created few gates that swallowed the flames and dissipated. They worked for only a moment, but it was enough for Muyang to get away. Diablo was livid and thousands of flames flew toward Muyang. Amon stopped them by building massive ice pillars. Do not delude yourself. I only thought that killing Diablo was necessary. Amon's tone was that of a proud child throwing a tantrum, because things did not go the way he wanted, but Muyang ignored it and raised his sword. My attack is effective. Anguish could cut into Diablo after having evolved and completed. However, Diablo's flesh immediately regenerated. Diablo's healing abilities were that of divinity, but there was a possibility now. It was a slight chance, but it had to be enough. Massive dams could crumble from a tiny leak, and that regenerating ability could not be infinite. Join me. There's no time to rest. So the King of the Dead entered the battlefield with a complaint after cleaning up the leftover demons along with Taken and Crimson Balrog. Diablo was one while Muyang had several allies. He had a chance with them, Amon's magic and Gremory's defense. Attack the wounds before they regenerate. Muyang's plan was a simple one. They would widen the cracks by pouring different attacks if Muyang was not enough. With a ringing noise, Diablo struck the ground with its tail, and soon massive flame pillars that stretched to the sky surrounded them. Accelerate. Muyang's time flowed the slowest as it could go. Only Muyang could move at full speed. However, Muyang's bones were cracking, and his skin was peeling off because he had used it several times already. It was no time to stop, and Muyang calmly went through the flames and struck with the force of a landslide. Diablo's chest split open, and even in a world slowed down by 128 times, Diablo's wound began to heal. Diablo's abilities were daunting, and he did not have time to put in the second and third strikes. However, Diablo was not the only one to match Muyang's speed, and Taken struck with the hard-won skills he acquired fighting for decades under Muyang's banner. Crimson Balrog then grabbed the ripped wound and tore it open with his strength. It was not enough. Second strike. Diablo bit Crimson Balrog's neck. There was a scream as the flame from Diablo's teeth burned Crimson Balrog's entire body. However, the hands that held the wound remained firm. Anguish began to move faster, and Muyang began to move as if he was dancing. Diablo was screaming as Muyang's sword was dismantling Diablo. However, Muyang's bones were twisting as the burden of using his sword in this slowed-down world almost overwhelmed him. The 51st stance. The Evil Slayer. Finally, Muyang could strike the finishing blow. The true use of Evil Slayer was to cut through the 50 lines Muyang had carved into Diablo's entire body. Muyang flew the sky and pierced Diablo's heart. The lines that stretched over Diablo's frame connected at once when Muyang stopped. With a crashing noise, Diablo's body crumbled. Solomon watched Muyang's movements and could not hide his surprise. Muyang had become stronger, and the power of the sword magnified and became complete. Seeing a weapon that held divinity was an extraordinary experience, even for Solomon. Then Muyang became one with the sword to overwhelm Diablo. Solomon laughed. A human was driving a god away. He has transcended the limits of humanity. Muyang was human but had exceeded the limits of its race. So was he a god? However, the only god was Solomon. Muyang was only a halfling who stole what was Solomon's to gain strength. If he fell into despair and was ruined, Muyang would fall into the void. He would become the same as the masters in the darkness. Diablo's body crumbled and fell on the ground. If Solomon lost Diablo, he could no longer influence the demon world. Solomon laughed even though he had lost the Angel of Time and the Prayer of Miracles. You cannot win against Diablo. The moment Diablo's body crumbled, Muyang saw multi-layered flame pillars spread on the ground. The world erupted in the true conflagration that even Muyang could not easily approach. When the flames stopped, Muyang could hardly believe his eyes. I had cut through the grain of his lines. Muyang had not seen a creature that could regenerate after he had cut the grain of its existence. No matter how high the creature's regenerating abilities were, this granted the true death. Muyang had never suspected that his attack would fail. However, Diablo had regenerated in flames with a thundering shout. Another disaster was that Diablo's flames had become even stronger. Was Diablo really going to burn the entire world? Muyang raised his sword, but his arm trembled. Evil Slayer had taken most of his strength. If he was prepared to die, maybe he could use it once more. I won't give up. Muyang still had his strength left and could move. Then Muyang would fight. The entire demon world saw the massive flame pillars that rose to the sky, and everyone shook at sight. He was one of them. Black Horse, faster, faster. We have to go to my husband. He pestered the Hell Horse. The horse also saw the sight, and while his instincts screamed to run away, Muyang seemed to be there. The Hell Horse raised its speed and many unicorns followed him. The sight was miserable. The ashes over the earth blackened the land. Diablo was undiminished and Crimson Balrog was opposing him, but his body was at the limits. Crimson Balrog's arm was ripped off, his eyes were blind and his horns were broken. However, Crimson Balrog did not step back for the sole reason of protecting Muyang. Damn. Taken's head rolled on the ground. Gremory and Amon were beyond recovery. Diablo pierced Crimson Balrog's heart, and he bit Diablo's head in turn. Muyang was right behind Crimson Balrog. His wings were burned and his entire body had burst and twisted until the bones showed. However, not a drop of blood fell because of the burns. Muyang's regenerating abilities were no longer working. Dear husband. Wuhi immediately flew to Muyang when she arrived, and the hell horse looked around him with sorrowful eyes. The unicorns surrounded Muyang and sang the song of recovery, but Muyang could not move a muscle. Please don't go. I'm here. Open your eyes. Wuhi's large eyes filled with tears, but the hell horse only held her back. They had been late and Muyang was not breathing. Crimson Balrog resisted to the end, refusing to believe Muyang's death to the end. Please no. You can't die. I'm sorry. Wuhi's tears flowed down her cheeks and wet Muyang's body. It was that moment when Muyang's body restored life as if she had poured water on dry ground. It was an impossible phenomenon. Wuhi's tears had created a miracle. Muyang was able to open his eyes when his burnt wings finished regenerating. A special condition has been met. The power of the immortal king, the 7 trials are now activated. Muyang stood. His charred, broken, brittle hands now had flesh and he reached out to touch his face and head. I live. Muyang furrowed his brow. Diablo was still alive after having regenerated once more and killed Muyang. Muyang had recognized his death and closed his eyes for the final time. My husband. He is alive. Another strange thing was that Muyang saw a fairy in front of him. Was this a dream? However, Muyang disregarded this notion because he knew that this was reality and a harsh one at that. The 7 trials. Muyang thought he had seen those words when he opened his eyes. The 7 trials was the name of the power he had taken from the doppelganger. It was a mythical power that could be used to resurrect up to 7 times. However, there was a penalty for each revival, and a reminder page in his status viewer popped up to refresh Muyang's memory. Skill name: the 7 trials, none. The immortal king overcame the impossible and perilous 7 trials and earned 7 lives. Lives left, 6. One loses something important for every revival. What did Muyang lose that was important to him? He turned back the dial on the status viewer. Everything was as Muyang remembered in terms of statistics and skills. Muyang confirmed that nothing was different. My husband. I was so worried. But don't worry, I come with a way to crush that thing. Who are you? Muyang pinched his forehead. His head hurt worse than when his body had crumbled. Yes. The fairy stopped still as a statue by Muyang's question. I don't know who you are, but move aside. I have no time to play with you. Muyang forced himself to stand up. He was in the middle of a battle and while he was not fully healed, there was no time to rest. He still had 6 lives left. Diablo could not revive limitlessly if it had similar powers as Muyang. Let's see who finishes first. Muyang gripped Anguish and it wailed in pain as his energies flowed. Muyang ignored Anguish's moans of disobedience. Crimson Balrog shouted not from agony, but to announce Muyang's revival. You did well. Crimson Balrog's condition was gruesome, but his delight in seeing Muyang's revival was as if he was healed. With a thud, Crimson Balrog's body crumbled. It was a miracle he had endured up to this time. Amon and Gremory had also gone down. Am I the only one left? Muyang still felt as if his head would burst. He saw the hell horse stand beside him as if to answer Muyang's question with a neigh. P.E. or nay. Oh. You're the hell horse. Muyang barely managed to recognize him and time seemed not to be the reason why his memory was so hazy. Was this a side effect of reviving or a temporary phenomenon? Muyang shook his head. It was not the time to contemplate such things. Hundreds of unicorns gathered as the hell horse whinnied. They may buy Muyang some time since unicorns had water and divine properties. You have no obligation to help me. However, Muyang shook his head since he knew that the hell horse no longer needed to act on Muyang's behalf. Muyang had already received help 3 times and the Kingslayer was no more. The hell horse was free, but he also did not listen to Muyang's words. Instead, the hell horse charged at Diablo before Muyang did. The hell horse had always been like that and would act by his own whims rather than listen to Muyang. Muyang spread his wings. Once more. He was not yet down and had some strength left. Muyang would fight, and as his sword cut through the void with a whirring noise, a massive shock wave crashed like a tidal wave of sound on Diablo. Diablo screamed again, and in a battle between monsters, a myth met another myth. My husband. Wuhi was struck dumb for a moment and stared at Muyang's back. How could he ask who she was? Did he really forget her? It had been a long time since they had met, and Muyang was always a bit impassive towards Wuhi. But he had asked Wuhi who she was. While Wu-He had been a most optimistic individual, she was so flabbergasted that she froze where she stood. This is not the time. Wu-He came to her senses because she knew Mu-Young could not defeat Diablo since it was an illusion, a god who did not exist. Husband, you must believe in me. It did not matter if Mu-Young had really forgotten her. Wu-He was Wu-He and Mu-Young was Mu-Young. Wu-He would be with Mu-Young, and for her to do so he had to be alive. So, Diablo had to be removed and Mu-Young had to trust Wu-He completely to do so. The summoner has to be somewhere nearby. Wu-He quickly looked around. While everyone was down, they were not annihilated. She could find Mu-Young's subordinates hiding in the corner, including the high elves Ain and Snow. It's that woman. Wu-He's wings fluttered. Snow was Diablo's summoner, or to be more exact, she built the illusion that was Diablo. Snow was necessary to remove Diablo and Diablo could be defeated. Little fairy, where are you going? However, Solomon appeared and held Wu-He's wings. While Solomon could not physically intervene, all fairies including Wu-He were under a contract with Solomon to create a trial and could gain a house, according to the prophets of the said trial. You swindler! Let go of me now. You say I'm a swindler? Solomon smirked because it was the first time he heard something like this. However, Wu-He now knew about Solomon's true intentions. The reason he had made the fairies create trials was to spread disturbances in this world. He had said that fairies would be given houses, but it had been an empty promise. So, it was natural that Wu-He called him a swindler. Let go of me. Holding the wings of a lady is a perverted act. Wu-He tried to move her wings until her face grew red, but she could not move an inch. It was inevitable since a mere fairy was no match for Solomon. I know you're the daughter of the fairy king. Was your name Wu-He? Is not. So let go of me. Time was of the essence and at this moment Mu-Young was deeply wounded. Solomon stared at Wu-He with some interest. I see that you have learned how to handle Diablo from the fairy king, so I can't let you go. Stupid. Idiot. Fool. Can you call those curses? They were all the bad words Wu-He knew and Solomon's smile deepened. At that moment Mu-Young broke through the ground with a crashing noise. He was beheaded and died instantly. However, an astonishing phenomenon occurred right after Mu-Young's crash, as his body came together to revive him. He seems to possess the power of resurrection, but also loses some of his memories every time he revives. Let go of me. Which memory did he lose this time? Solomon looked like a child who found an amusing toy. Watch carefully. He will forget why he is fighting later on. Solomon found Mu-Young intriguing. A half-god dragged into the darkness just before becoming a divine being was a rare scene. It would be a loss for Solomon not to see Mu-Young's pain and despair. Husband. Husband. Mu-Young stood up every time he fell amidst Wu-He's shouts and charged towards Diablo. However, Mu-Young's attacks grew weaker as he lost power each time he came back. On the other hand, Diablo's attacks became fiercer, and its flames spread like it would swallow the world whole. He will fall in vain into the darkness. Solomon thought that Mu-Young would be forced to acknowledge the gap between him and Diablo. The end was near as everyone was the same regardless of their willpower. Even Kingslayer and the Death Lord could not win against the Whispers. They could not overcome themselves and fell into despair. Likewise, Mu-Young will also fall into the darkness and live with failure like the others. I'm sorry, please let me go. Wu-He burst into tears. She knew how to defeat Diablo and she had managed to reach the battlefield, but Solomon was in the way. Wu-He had no way to get around this situation except to watch. The thought that she was useless to Mu-Young pierced her heart. My husband, I was too late. I'm so sorry. With a thud, Mu-Young fell and with a snap he rose. How many times had he done this? Mu-Young could not remember. He could not remember why he was fighting this hopeless battle. I have to fight. Mu-Young only thought that he had to kill Diablo. Mu-Young tried to spread his wings but found he had no strength left. He stood up using his hands and looked about his surroundings. There were mountains of burning corpses everywhere. Only death was here as individuals died and killed each other. I am the same. Mu-Young raised the sword only by instinct. The enemy was too strong, big, fast, and regenerated endlessly. Diablo continued to revive no matter how many times Mu-Young killed him. It was that moment someone whispered to Mu-Young to give up. The voice told him to rest and he had done enough. It also told him that it was a miracle that Mu-Young came this far, and another death would end him. Is it true? Was this the end? What would be the end? Muyang felt something was wrong. He could not remember his name. He could not remember anything. Massive pillars made of flame soared with Diablo's scream tis he devoured this world. Muyang raised his sword and walked forward. He had to fight to defeat Diablo. Muyang had never known despair and failure, but one thing was certain. They did not fit Muyang, so he went forward without resting. The whispers that asked Muyang to give up stopped. You are something. The darkness left Muyang with that praise. Diablo crushed Muyang and pulverized his body. As Muyang lay dying, his eyes met a small fairy who was staring at him. Why is that fairy crying? Muyang also did not know the answer to this question as the fairy continued to cry and said that she was sorry. What was she sorry about that she could not come earlier and could only watch? Come to think of it, Muyang remembered a fairy who would cry every day. That fairy irritated and bothered him, but Muyang felt something was missing when she was not around. She would cause accidents and would always pester him. There had been warmth that Muyang had not felt for a long time. While fairies did not have a physical body, she had been warm. Her name had been. Muyang's eyes met the fairy again and he smiled. Wuhi. The 7 trials have been overcome. The body of the immortal has been completed. You have gained the divinity of the immortal king. Diablo's foot crushed Muyang, but he grabbed it and twisted and Diablo fell. Muyang stood up, but his gaze was not on Diablo. Muyang reached out with his hand, and Wuhi flew out of Solomon's grasp. If Solomon could influence Wuhi because of Muyang's and Wuhi's contract, there would be a problem as Muyang and Wuhi were tied together by a strong bond. Husband. It's been a long time. Wuhi cried because she finally rejoined Muyang. Solomon couldn't believe it. You overcame the whispers of the darkness? The darkness. It had whispered to Muyang of despair, futility and hopelessness, but Muyang had not listened to the whispers. It is impossible that any being could prevail against the whispers. Solomon was astonished because he knew that they all fell into despair before becoming gods. Most of them are swallowed by the darkness and denied divinity. He had thought Muyang would be one of them and had been sure he could not win. Solomon's conviction crumbled as Muyang stood triumphantly, with most of his wounds healed. More than anything else, Solomon could feel Muyang's divinity, and he had taken the first step as a god. If allowed, Muyang's transition would soon be complete. Diablo, kill him. Now is the time, right after he is out of the shell. Solomon began to feel pressure since he would lose his angels and the prayer of miracles if Muyang indeed became a god. Diablo rose to hear Solomon's call with a battle cry, and Wuhi spoke in despair. It's no use. Diablo cannot be killed. I know. You do. Muyang knew that Diablo could not be killed and spoke to Wuhi. How can I remove that illusion? We have to convince the woman who summoned Diablo. Wuhi pointed at Snow. Snow. When she had her memories, she had a black wings signifying her fall and a white wings as a celestial. However, she lost all of her memories after summoning Diablo and now followed Muyang because she thought Muyang as her father. Snow was unharmed, even though she was within Diablo's attack range. Muyang confirmed that some of his subordinates, including Snow and the High Elf Ein, were there. Diablo cannot kill her, but she can erase Diablo. What should I do? Diablo began to chase after Muyang as he started to run. You have to make Snow believe that Diablo is a fake since Diablo is the illusion of a god born from her wishes. What happens if someone kills Snow? That cannot happen. Then Diablo will be granted immortality. Wuhi shook her head and Muyang felt some relief. He would not have to kill a woman who thought him as her father and followed him. The act would have left a bitter taste and he did not want to do it in the first place. The Diablo Order. While she had been a saint in the past, when Muyang met Snow again, she was the high priestess of the Diablo Order. Snow believed that they could not overcome the demon gods and faced extinction, so Diablo was the only hope to save this world. Therefore, Snow summoned Diablo because she was convinced that the almighty demon god from another world would change everything. However, her belief had been wrong. Father. Snow came running, although her shoes had disappeared and her feet were bleeding. Her body was shaking from fear of Diablo. Hope had become fear in Snow. You do not have to be afraid. Muyang stroked Snow's head as he spoke. How should he remove this fear? He could not think of a way to erase Snow's fear and make her believe that Diablo was only an illusion. If she were forced to believe but doubted it in her heart, Diablo would not disappear. So Muyang decided that he should just speak his heart. Snow, I don't know if you remember, but if you do, I will say that you were mistaken. Young went on with some difficulty since he was not used to consoling and soothing another person. But he had to do it, so the words kept flowing. We have to change ourselves. If you cannot overcome your fear, you will fall. After all you have done is pass on your fear to others. Summoning Diablo was giving up, to let her fears win. Snow had seen hope in Diablo because she thought she could not do it. She threw away her courage. Young stared fiercely into Snow's eyes. However, if you cannot control your fear even now. Young held Snow's shoulders in a firm grasp. Believe that I will win, that I will save the world. If you believe me, I will make the impossible possible. The way Snow had chosen for the world's salvation was twisted. Young was surrounded by proof. Here was not salvation, but Diablo burning down the entire world, leaving only ashes. Did Snow want this form of salvation? Probably not. Snow truly wanted to save the world even though she had chosen the wrong method. Snow had to face reality and take the next step. Young was only holding out his hand. Snow began to compose herself and spoke slowly. I believe you. It was the first coherent sentence Snow had spoken after losing her memory. Snow had seen much by Young's side and watched him stand up after he had fallen over and over again. She knew that Young was speaking the truth and that he possessed the power to make the impossible possible. Snow was sure Young had that power. He would not push her to believe that Diablo was an illusion, but that Young could defeat it. Snow began to believe. Young nodded and turned around. No more words were needed. Faith would become the power to change everything. Nothing will change. You will never defeat Diablo. Solomon's words were like a spell because he wanted Young to see he could not win against Diablo. It was a form of hypnosis, but now Young denied everything. Solomon was finished. Young denied Diablo. You are not gods. Even if they were, Young would oppose the notion and would prove they were not different from him as he denied and stepped on them. His sword began to moan savagely. Young was cutting down an illusion and he did not even need to find the grain. Diablo's flesh disappeared like smoke. How can a mere human? Solomon screamed. The tables had turned and Diablo could not do anything against Young. Moreover, humans were a failed race. How can one of them reach divinity? No matter how Solomon tried to deny it, Young was a human who had opened all of his possibilities. The word possibility. Solomon could not see it and refused to recognize it. He denied the possibility that existed in all races and just wanted to eradicate them. Of course, Solomon did not want to acknowledge it, but Diablo began to disappear whenever Young's sword touched him. This was reality, one that did not disappear no matter how hard Solomon tried to deny it. Is it the effects of divinity? Diablo's attacks could not damage Young anymore because a fake god loses to a real god. Young cut up Diablo's body, and a strange phenomenon occurred when Diablo was completely obliterated. Was it because Diablo had been an illusion? Everything came back, even the crushed, seared land, the dead demons and Gregory and Amon, who had been at the brink of extinction. Young's subordinates also came back. Amazing. It was an eye-opening sight as everything came back as if nothing had happened. However, the traces on Young's body from fighting Diablo did not disappear. I cannot believe it, Amon spoke as he stood up. He was the master of magic, but what just occurred was a miracle. While Amon had complicated feelings, he clearly had revived. Young, you won. Gremory opened her mouth as she looked around. She understood the situation but did not know why they were happening. Solomon ground his teeth as his efforts resulted in nothing. You will regret destroying Diablo. Regret. Solomon should be the one regretting because nothing would have happened if he did not target Young. His attack had been the chance Young needed. Because of Solomon, Young had risen a number of levels, to an area he could not have reached if he had only faced the demon gods. It was that moment when Solomon looked at the sky and frowned. That sly, email protected. He's here already. The sky suddenly turned black as if to announce that there was still more to come. Rain began to fall and dark clouds surrounded them. Young noticed the unexpected change, which was definitely not natural phenomenon. Also, the sheer amount of magic and countless indications of something approaching them was alarming. Solomon stared at Young. He cannot be stopped without Diablo. Give me Ars Nova and Ars Polina to me now. Or you and everything you believe in will be gone. Solomon looked desperate because he feared what was about to happen. Myung could hardly believe it. All the demon gods feared Solomon the most, but now he was the one who was afraid. Myung's brow furrowed because of Solomon's reaction, and the immense amount of condensed magic he could sense signified only one thing. Is Baal coming? Baal. Yes, you called him that. Solomon's words were significant, and a massive thunderstorm broke the sky at the same time. The numerous demons who had gathered from all around looked up. There were demon kings and demon gods among them, and they quickly assembled near Myung. However, they did not attack Myung or Solomon and only knelt facing the massive whirlwind. Baal. Baal. Save us. Save us. The demons chanted with fanatical belief, and he appeared from the center of the whirlwind. Is it really Baal? Myung frowned the moment he saw Baal. His eyes were not deceiving him, but Myung still could not believe what he was seeing. The ruler of all demon gods. The one who stands above all. The only being who can oppose Solomon. They called him Baal. However, Myung had no idea what was going on. Baal and Solomon. The two not only wore the same face on the outside, but they were identical, down to the very nature of their existence. Baal stared at Solomon and then turned his head at Myung. You can see through me. Baal's appearance changes according to those who see him. He takes on the form of what they fear the most, and Baal overwhelmed them by pretending to be their terror. However, Myung was exempt from this illusion because he had eyes that could see the truth. Myung saw Solomon and Baal as two same beings who cannot and should not be the same but were. What was going on? Are you curious? Baal seemed to know what Myung was thinking, and his slight smile was like a small victory. On the other hand, Solomon was silent because he feared Baal, who was the same being as him. We were once one god but are now divided in two. Baal spoke and no one could move. His words had power different from Solomon. If Solomon could affect the world through Diablo's power, Baal overwhelmed everyone just by his presence. He wanted to recreate the world after destroying it, and I wanted one single evolved being who overcame everything. There could be no compromise on our positions. I stole the Lemegeton from him but lost control of Earth. The Lemegeton was a book that held all, including Ars Nova, Ars Polina, and the 72 demon gods. Baal had stolen what could be called everything from Solomon. I returned to the demon world and turned back time through the power of Ars Polina. This is the reason why the memories of beings who entered the underworld are different. Ars Polina, the angel of time. The name of the angel that Myung possessed was mentioned by Baal. Also, another secret was revealed, and now Myung knew why people who arrived at the Blue Temple had different memories of the past. I could not use Ars Nova because it is the power of miracles. It is a power only those who had been touched by a miracle can use. This was why I unleashed Ars Polina. Baal talked as if he had calculated everything from the beginning. Ars Polina held the power of time, and it was like a miracle itself. The angel Ars Nova could only be received by someone who had been given the authority of divinity, which is the final divine qualification that the masters in the darkness lacked. However, Baal began to question something. It's strange because Ars Polina had been almost exhausted, so there was no way for it to go back in time. Did you make me search for Ars Nova? Myung spoke because he did not like being Baal's puppet. Baal replied with a smile. The being that carries Ars Polina will receive a strong power over time, but it was difficult to find an appropriate subject. Took a century to find you. Because of it, you have become stronger than anyone else since you have gained strength that would have taken other individuals decades in a year or two. What he spoke was true since Myung had become stronger at a breakneck pace. If what Baal said were facts, the being that carried Ars Polina was destined to become a divine being. However, Myung was sure it was not merely because of Ars Polina. The reason Myung had become stronger was because of his aspirations, desperation, and strength of will. It was because he was incapable of giving up. Baal acknowledged these traits. You surprise me. I did not know you could become an anomaly this fast. Thanks to you, Solomon took the bait and came back to the demon world with Diablo. Baal's eyes turned back to Solomon, and Solomon's body shook with emotion at Baal's words. There was not even a trace of composure left in Solomon. It was as if he had surrendered when Baal appeared. Solomon, you wanted to become a wise king like your namesake, but the results were different. While it is an embarrassment, you're my other half. Now the time has come for us to become one. You and I had been separated for too long, and now we are two different beings. You really believe that you can take all of my powers? Solomon opposed Baal, and Baal stared at Muyang as an answer. Isn't that why we prepared a vessel? Baal reached out with his hand, and though Muyang drew anguish, he froze in place. I cannot move. Muyang furrowed his brow. He could not resist Baal's power despite having gained true divinity because there was an insurmountable gap between Muyang and Baal. The reason Baal had not been able to touch Solomon was because of an imaginary god, Diablo. Muyang had cut through the illusion to allow Baal to act. With a loud screech, Solomon's body began to be dragged towards Baal. His form started to disintegrate into smoke. Baal. 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 Solomon dissolved with a final cry, and Baal raised both of his hands. You will be purified again and again within the vessel, and I will take what remains. Muyang's body floated, and Baal began to inject Solomon's power into him. The long journey has come to an end. Muyang felt an explosion inside his head. He immediately felt blurred and helpless. Was everything planned by Baal? Muyang began to question everything. If Baal intentionally created Muyang and everything he had done up to this point was for this moment, it was unbearable. Muyang had raced to come here without any rest and gave up everything for victory. The purpose of his existence was to give birth to an anomaly and attract Solomon. Muyang was a trap set by Baal for the sole purpose of capturing Solomon. No. It was that moment when a small echo rang in Muyang's head. Another angel that had been hiding appeared the moment Solomon's divinity dug up Muyang's soul. You're not a mere vessel, and you promised me that you would overcome all ordeals and hardships. Don't lose. Who was this voice? Muyang felt nostalgic, like he had heard it a long time ago. However, he did not remember who it was. The Kingslayer made preparations to wake me up for you. He had cast the oath of time on Solomon, and we gained some time thanks to it. At the moment Solomon's divinity mixed together with Muyang, the oath of time the Kingslayer had cast on Solomon was activated. It was a curse to confine Solomon, who had escaped the restrictions of time, back into reality. The curse enabled the angel of time, Ars Polina, who had been asleep deep in Muyang's soul, to wake up. Wings spread above Muyang's head, and a beautiful angel with 8 pure white wings showed herself. Ars Polina. You must have exerted your strength. Baal shouted in shock at this unexpected event. Baal, not everything will follow your will. How? What can you do now? The vessel is already in my hands and your role is finished. Muyang is not a mere vessel but someone much nobler than you. He just needs to understand. Ars Polina gathered her hands together and Baal glared at her action. What? You're going to? With a seething noise at that moment Baal and Muyang's time stopped. All light dissipated from Ars Polina's wings and she fell down. She could only stop time for a little while with the strength she had left. It was literally their one chance. Please win as you had before. You want to win, don't you? Ars Polina believed that Muyang would become complete by absorbing Solomon's divinity, and will not be swallowed by it. The noble knight of glory gave everything he had for this one chance. So she continued to believe as others did. In Noble Knight of Glory equals Kingslayer. Suddenly Muyang, Baal and Solomon disappeared. What happened? Gremory was shocked like other demons and demon gods. However, this war did no end because they had disappeared. Muyang will return because he is someone who will not die because others tried to kill him. Taken approached them first with a sword in his hand. He knew that battle lines had to be quickly formed at this moment. Crimson Balrog, the Hell Horse and Unicorns, the dead, including the 9-tailed fox and demons under Gremory's command, also gathered together. They were outnumbered, but Gremory was not alone. Amon. Do not misunderstand. I just do not want to be trapped by Solomon or Baal again. Amon was on Gremory's side. He was the master of magic and had become stronger by Muyang, freeing him from his shackles. Amon was now the essence of magic itself. However, they were still on the losing side because no one from the coalition took Gremory's side. There were a mere 30,000 soldiers, including Amon's subordinates, that Gremory could battle with, and the opponents had tens of times more troops. Amon. Are you betraying us? The 8th demon god Barbatos spoke in anger as his goat horns shook. Amon coldly shook his head. I never pledged my loyalty to Baal. He just acted on our fear. All demon gods had lowered their heads voluntarily to suppress their fear by being loyal to Baal. Amon had been the same but not anymore. He would not be governed by fear now. Do you really believe Baal is right? We're not insects he can put into a pot for us to battle. All demon gods knew what Baal wanted, so no one intervened in this war. They only gave orders to eradicate all races and the opposite side because they knew Baal would only take one race, who would survive the war with him when he returned. That was why they were so desperate, and Baal had been a cruel tyrant because his followers had truly believed in him while it would have been right to betray Baal. Amon, only he can protect us from everything. We will not lose our home in vain like that anymore. We will not let our lives be stomped down. Of course, Amon understood their thoughts. They had felt helpless by enemies that suddenly appeared one day which destroyed their home and caused many deaths. They did not want to go through that again and searched for a protector. Both sides just had different ideas to achieve that goal. Amon invisibly shook his head because he knew that his words would not reach them. Barbatos spoke again. We are going back to Earth, our home. So we will eliminate you all. We will crush and take everything for us. Do not curse us as base and ruthless. We also have had everything taken away from us. Yes, you cannot survive here if you're normal. Amon acknowledged their wishes and thoughts as Gremory did. He could not denounce them for taking a different path, but it was evident that only the victorious side will survive. They prepared to attack and Crimson Balrog let out a battle cry. They did not know who was going to return, whether it was Baal, Solomon, or Muyang, but they all burned for their desires and ideals. It was a titanic struggle that shook the world itself, and the titanic blows between the demon gods formed cracks across the surface of the demon world, weeping bloody tears of lava and vomiting black smoke. Bei Sungmin could feel it more acutely than anyone else. Are we too late? The Child of the Moon spoke. Muyang must have already met Solomon because nothing else could cause the world itself to shake. I know that we are not. Bei Sungmin shook his head. While he was still disguised as Merlin, the Child of the Moon and the King of the Dragons had felt his essence. That was why Bei Sungmin could speak freely to them. He thought of the connection Muyang had with them and the fact Muyang had started and changed everything. Bei Sungmin was still a central figure in the chaos that followed Muyang's wake. Therefore he knew that Muyang was still alive. However, the strange thing was that his heart ached as they approached the savage battlefield. All the demon gods moved quickly and we also have to go there. It had taken over a month to eradicate 2 demon gods. However, all the other demon gods mobilized immediately afterward. Bei Sungmin thought the demon gods had been targeting them in revenge. But the demon gods were moving towards the battlefield where a mighty tempest was brewing. The battlefield was chaos itself. They had come near the edge but could not see what was going on because of the massive and fierce black storm. However, Bei Sungmin was sure that half of the demon world would be in ruins. The storm left nothing behind. The demon gods became dust, their spirits shrieking in silent agony as they were erased from existence. And corpses were incinerated, leaving nothing behind, not even ash. If this continued, at least half of the demon world would be left in ruin and despair, and seeing the sight was an overwhelming experience. We have to go in. The King of the Dragons spoke and he lifted his massive body to control the winds. Bei Sungmin could finally see the battlefield with his own eyes as the king cut the storm. There were shouts, screams and wails, and Bei Sungmin saw hell. He could not count those in the battle and everyone was locked together in mortal struggle. He could not differentiate between his allies and foes. However, Bei Sungmin's gaze fixed onto one spot. Why is that child there? Bei Suzy stood where Bei Sungmin was staring, and she was eliminating her enemies with shining weapons that illuminated her body. The lineage of light. However, that was not all. Sungmin saw that Bei Suzy was sharing Muyang's, his master's powers. She had done the same when facing in Roth, but now the amount she shared was much greater. Who do we attack? They are all demons. Don't we have to attack them all? The allied races were afraid and desperate because of the unimaginable number of the demons in comparison with theirs. However, demons were everywhere in this place, and while they needed to attack, no one was moving because they dared not attack their allies. All demons who do not have protective barriers are enemies. The Child of the Moon shouted, and they saw some of the demons were shielded with barriers Gremory had created. There were no other demon gods who could put up barriers. The allied races joined the ranks of the shielded, and they fought their opponents as they had done before. However, Bei Sungmin's gaze was still fixated on Bei Suzy. Bei Suzy clenched her teeth and suppressed a scream. A demon's claw had slashed her. We have to win. She struck with her fist at a demon, and its face disappeared with a shriek of wind. Bei Suzy did not rest and kept on fighting. How many days has it been already? She woke up in the middle of the battlefield, and while she had heard what had happened from a fairy named Wu He, it had taken time to put things together. However, when she did, Bei Suzy chose to fight. This is his power. Muyang's strength supported Bei Suzy's will, and it was stronger than ever. That meant Muyang was still nearby and had not lost yet. So Bei Suzy had to fight and could not fall. The problem was that there were too many enemies and countless foes to fight. I have to fight for him. Bei Suzy could feel the hardships Muyang was suffering right now from sharing his power. The loneliness and despair she felt from him led Bei Suzy to want to fight for Muyang. He had saved her so many times, and now was the time to pay Muyang back. You're insolent for a human. The 28th demon god Barith. The golden demon god started to overwhelm Bei Suzy. He's dangerous. Bei Suzy could not face the demon god, no matter how much power she shared with Muyang. However, she had to do it anyway. The problem was that everyone was tired out by now, and the number of her allies had noticeably diminished. If it were not for Amon, they would have all died. Amon was buying them time by using magic defensively and also had eliminated 4 demon gods. I can do this. All eradication conditions have been solved after Baal disappeared. They died when their bodies were slain without needing to fulfilling the conditions. So Bei Suzy thought she could do this. Bei Suzy screamed as the metallic demon god was fast despite its solidity. However, it was an attack she should have avoided. Her senses dulled from the days of fighting and her strength had left her. I have to do this. Bei Suzy stood up stumbling and breathed through a massive metal bullet. While Suji Bei managed to receive it, the bones of her arms both broke with a loud cracking noise. Give up. You have already lost. Shut up. She had no time to take in a breath while Berith continued to throw metal bullets that hit like a falling mountain. Bei Suzy's body was at its limit. I need to do this. Bei Suzy's eyes closed and her body crumbled. This was a chance that took so much to grab, and she wanted to meet Muyang and learn the truth. She wanted to know what he was hiding and ask why he kept them apart. Are you going to give up like this? Suji Bei barely managed to open her eyes by a voice speaking to her. You are. He did not speak but raised a staff to block Beritha's metal bullets. Bei Suzy barely managed to stand using both hands. Wait. I did not say I will give up. Why can't I keep my eyes off you? Bei Sungmin turned his vacant eyes, and they seemed to be lamenting something lost. Bei Suzy answered herself with another question. Why do I keep looking at you? Bei Sungmin tried to speak something, but he closed his mouth again. He wanted to reveal that he was her father, but his body set the line between them. He was dead and Bei Suzy was alive. They existed in entirely different worlds. If you won't speak, I'll find out, even if I have to force you or even Muyang. Bei Suzy's willpower returned to her as she spoke sincerely. Bei Sungmin closed his mouth and grabbed his staff tightly. You have grown well. Children grew fast even when their parents turned around and were doing something else. Bei Suzy had been an exceptional child, and Bei Sungmin felt pride and sadness at the same time. Bei Suzy had grown to become an admirable woman, and he had not been able to be with her on that journey. She would not leave the battleground until this war came to an end, and he could not stop her now. Therefore they had to win. Bei Sungmin raised his staff and opened the door to summon monsters who would join the battle. Do you see? Muyang raised his head to look at Ars Polina as she spoke. So many people gathered for you, Muyang. Your wish has come true. I wish. You told me you did not want to be alone anymore. I said that to you? Muyang could not believe he had said that. Ars Polina nodded. You wanted to do something more meaningful and overcome life, death, and everything in between. I don't remember. Are you sure that you just want to forget? You are not used to these kinds of things. Ars Polina smiled. Their time had been stopped, and Muyang was only staring at the time going by past them. Even if I did not forget, what would change? Nothing, but you are not alone anymore. You did it. However, it is not enough. I can only watch since Solomon's divinity is trying to erase my existence. Muyang and Solomon's divinity were clashing and merging. Muyang instinctively knew that he would not exist after this process was completed. Will you give up? No, but there's nothing I can do. Weren't you someone who made his path if there wasn't one? You speak as if you know me well. I watched for you a long time and that's why I know that you're just confused right now. I thought I arrived at my destination, or I believed so because I had never stopped until now. However, I learned that there are no starting points or ending points. Is that right? Look, you gathered them together not by Baal's intentions but by your wish. Muyang looked outside to see Taken, Bei Sungmin, Crimson Balrog, the Nine-Tailed Fox and Bei Suzy, and the Transcendentals fighting despite their numerical inferiority. Everyone gathered because of Muyang's will, including Gremory and Amon. Muyang had been the one to move them into action and now they were dying. The results would be irreversible if he acted too late for those who came together for Muyang. But what can I do? I cannot do anything when time has stopped. Muyang only could speak of them and everything would be over when Baal started to move. The gap was too large, but Ars Polina smiled. You can do it. Baal intentionally gave you only Ars Nova and me and you made everything else. Those unique factors will work for you even when the time has stopped. She was telling Muyang to do what he could. Muyang thought about what he could do and something only he could do. My sword. It was a weapon only Muyang had, and he raised the sword in his mind as Baal had never intended Muyang to have it. His sword was composed of 51 strikes but was not completed yet. He did not need his body to move but accepted his sword and started to create it anew. Muyang went deep inside himself and slowed down the flow of time by 128 times. Muyang contemplated again and again and focused on his sword. What choices do I want to make? His thoughts came to that as Solomon and Baal had their own goals. On the other hand, Muyang wanted to do something meaningful rather than trying to become a hero. Therefore he did not hesitate to kill. However, Muyang now had to decide on the end, because he could only walk forward when there was a destination. What made Muyang act? He remembered again that he wanted to right the wrongs. Once he realized that he saw the prayer of the gods, Ars Nova. It was a power that could make miracles happen and a power that could be used by someone who had caused a miracle. Muyang grafted that power onto his sword. He was determined to make a miracle happen if it was needed to change everything. I would become a god if I needed to. If he needed divinity to become one who could right the wrongs, Muyang would accept it. Muyang finally found the determination to do so and would now give everything he had to a specific goal rather than simple survival and a determination to not be used by others. Muyang merged his sword and if the evil slayer was the stance of 50 strikes, he compressed it down and made it into a single strike. He merged dozens of miracles into his sword and swung anguish in the time he had slowed down. It was then Solomon's divinity reacted. The power began to become one with anguish rather than just merging together. You have achieved the God of Swords and become the God and soul of the sword. You have gained a Lord class, the Angel of Time. All titles, effects, and classes are added together to create a new class. An eternal class, the King of Battlefield, has been completed. Muyang opened his eyes after completing everything and stood on his own. At the same time, 6 black wings and 6 white wings fluttered to start the flow of time again. Hyacinth trembled because she knew that he was the king she had desperately searched and waited. He had 12 wings and a beautiful form behind his impassive face. He was more than anything she had imagined, and Hyacinth felt awed just by looking at him. While she had substantial powers to beguile, but now she was the one beguiled. Hyacinth felt she could do anything if only he would see and speak to her. Muyang was her king and she pledged once more that she would only follow Muyang. Pai King. Hyacinth kneeled in the middle of the battlefield and blue aura soon surrounded her. No one could approach her as if she had created a sanctuary. Crimson Balrog fell with a cry. Even with his durability he could not last if he was attacked by tens of demon gods. Gremory had supported him but she was also at her limit. The Transcendentals had come with millions of allies. However, there were too many strong foes and it was a losing battle from the start. Gremory used the last of her strength but had to kneel before the massive troops. They were desperate, they needed a hope, anything to change their situation. A chance. Gremory turned her head towards where Muyang, Baal and Solomon had disappeared. However, it was useless because even Muyang could not change this situation. He might be a wind but not a tornado. However, she heard wings fluttering. Have you become enlightened while your time stopped? You are still merely a vessel. You cannot turn the tables. Gremory also heard Baal's voice as they appeared again without Solomon. She saw him above Baal. Mr. Dear husband. Bei Suzy and Wuhi shouted first. Gremory followed suit silently because Mu Young had appeared again in a changed form. He had 12 wings of light and darkness. Mu Young raised Anguish with a blank face, and the black moving carpet covering the land as far as you could see. Baal's demons disappeared when Anguish struck. That meant hundreds of thousands of demons on Baal's side evaporated in an instant by a single swing of Anguish. Have you absorbed Solomon's divinity? That's impossible. A vessel cannot make that divinity their own. Baal spoke in disbelief. Only I alone chose the path I will walk. Mu Young spoke. He had gained something greater than Solomon's divinity. He had completed his sword and crystallized his goal. Since all the powers had been added together to become Mu Young's, the name it was called by did not matter now, including the power of miracles and the power of time. Then I will take them away by force. Baal started to transform into a form similar to Diablo. However, he was larger and had more horns. I will become complete with your divinity, and rule over all dimensions by becoming a god with ultimate power. The moment Baal stepped forward, Mu Young murmured, acceleration, to spring forward. Time began to flow 256 times faster, which was one level higher than the 128 times. Mu Young had reached an area the Kingslayer had been unable to cross. It was a divine territory, and Mu Young had completed the Kingslayer's dream for him. I am the speaker for all possibilities. Mu Young was different from Solomon or Baal because he had opened all possibilities and gained them. The king of the battlefield had been completed because of them, and no one could defeat Mu Young here, even if the opponent were a god. One of Baal's arms fell to the ground when Mu Young's sword touched it. Anguish danced smoothly, and Baal felt his body being torn apart in slow motion. He had been trapped in time as things became 256 times faster. This cannot be. You speak too slowly. Mu Young stopped the acceleration and Baal's body crumbled down at that moment. While Baal's pieces gathered together, they could not recover their original form. Baal became only a massive and ugly lump because Anguish cast a potent curse. Do you think you can be a beacon of hope for them? You all will not survive since Earth is already contaminated. Only demons can live there. Baal spoke and Mu Young nodded. He remembered the entirety of Dantalion's memories when completing his divinity. Mu Young saw a contaminated and destroyed Earth unfit for living organisms. While demon gods believed that Baal would purify the planet, he did not possess the power of miracles. Therefore Solomon created the demon race who could survive anywhere by putting together the strengths of all races. This was why Solomon tried to create a new and more perfect organism. However, Mu Young was different from them. I believe in all evolutions and their possibilities. Faith will not solve the problems. You will regret this and shed tears of blood as they die in front of you. Baal knew that he had lost as everything ended when he was trapped in the restraints of time. The eradication condition that necessitated killing all demon gods did not apply for a being with a higher divinity than him. Mu Young's face grew rigid before swinging Anguish. Do not decide my regrets. The long war ended with Baal's eradication and the removal of all demon gods on the coalition side. Paimon, who had been a spectator, could not avoid Mu Young's sword. He had observed Kingslayer, Solomon and Baal's deaths, and Mu Young trapped him in the eternal restraints of time. It had been a fitting end for the spectator, but Baal's disappearance broke down the axis that had been maintaining this world. The world shook and started to crumble down. Mu Young became a guide who led them. He met someone who came out to greet him when they arrived at the walls of the Blue Temple. I had been waiting for you. Merlin. He was the true Merlin and not the imitation. While his alter ego had tried to take on Mu Young as a student, now the tables were reversed. Your master is dead. I only need to serve a nobler master. Merlin had a different opinion from Solomon, and that was why he built the walls and trained people. While many people died in the process, Merlin had decided that they would not survive in the demon world if they could not pass the Blue Temple. So Mu Young asked a question. Do you know the way to Earth? The sky mirror will become a path. Baal had created the sky mirror, and it seemed to be the road that connected Earth and the demon world. Mu Young took everything including the Ark and also the sky mirror. It had begun to serve Mu Young when he had gained Solomon's divinity. People had been surprised at the real Merlin appearing in front of them, but Mu Young was indifferent. Merlin opened his mouth with care. However, they will not last. Earth has been contaminated to the extent that they cannot survive. Do not worry. Muyang smiled because he had finished the preparations. The art of death. Everyone had been recreated, and that was not all. Muyang endowed them with possibilities, which was the last ability the Death Lord had given to Muyang. They would continue to adjust and evolve through the opportunities Muyang had imbued them. Muyang believed in their possibilities. Then let's go. Muyang led them on the path opened in the sky mirror once it was completed. Dear husband, let us go together. Mister. Who is that old skeleton? Your father's bones. Daddy. Daddy. Brother. Don't leave me behind. Bai King, I will follow you anywhere. There were side effects due to the power of domination. All survivors, including Wu He, Bei Suzy, Bei Sungmin, Snow, Ogre and Hyacinth, reacted the same except for Talcan. He shook his head as he spoke. Look at the chaos fit for the King of Chaos. If I had a choice, would I have been able to live a different life? He had killed too much, and his hands were stained with the blood of those who did not have to die. It would be impossible to live with others with the overwhelming stench of blood on him. Muyang fell onto his knees and blood spurted everywhere from holes all over his body. The blood flow was such that it was surprising he had not already died. It was too much for Muyang to face 300 skilled assassins and their leader despite the finest training in the assassin forest. It has been a long road. Muyang forced his lips to curl in a smile. He did not remember his own name or how to smile anymore. Everything had changed after he had been summoned to the underworld, a hell-like land where the 72 demon gods ruled. Humanity had been summoned little by little over a long time, and Muyang was among them. He had to protect his life from all sorts of monsters without time to adapt. He could not trust other human beings because life was cheap. They had created a place specializing in murder, such as the assassin forest, to protect the petty authority they had. Muyang had been taken captive not long after he had entered the demon world and killed other people under the influence of indoctrination and drugs. People who would have been the hope for humanity died in his hands. All remorse disappeared a long time ago, and Muyang no longer felt anything when killing people. He was no longer fit live among others. Muyang raised his head. This is the last time I will see a sky like this again. The sky he saw was incomparably clear, and because the alien stars were so beautiful, Muyang felt sorrow. He had wanted to face death with a smile, but he could not help but weep. I never wanted to do any of this. Muyang killed them all because he thought it was the right path. He hated himself for not feeling anything by their deaths. Could I change if I was reborn again? He had lived an empty life where he was a pawn that moved by others' will. Muyang reached out to touch a corpse. The dead were neither warm nor had any expression. However, Muyang wanted to feel emotions and warmth. Warmth. Muyang wanted to change, but he could not because there was no time left for him and he had come too far. His eyes started to blur and his heartbeat began to slow down. But if time is given, if he is given the chance to change, I will never give up. Muyang grasped at the light in the distance. Thank you all for coming with me in this journey. With this, King of the Battlefield is complete.